I definitely a South African accent. Whenever I do interviews or the work that I do here, people always kind of very subtle about it. Is that a South African accent I hear? And then I say full blown. Because in a world of, political correctness and sensitivity, most people are quite, not always sure how to embrace that. So thank you very much for inviting me today. And I'll say a little bit how this came about. I'm going to start right and say, so my lens is really, my training, I'm a South African trained industrial and organizational psychologist. My first 14 years, good morning everyone, if you're joining, just doing an introduction. My first 14 years of my career spent in South Africa, or build up my career literally working across sectors, across organizations. I mean, the beginning bit of your career is very much about learning how to work, right? And building a resume. I've worked in public sector organizations, in corporate sector, consulting firms, worked as an independent psychologist. And really my expertise, or one of the pillars would be an assessment, and that's really what informs good decision making from an individual point of view, a team point of view, and a talent management point of view in organizations. I have moved around. There's been lots of change in the last 12 years. So there's been 2 continent moves. I've been in the UK for the last 7 years. Before that, I lived in Tokyo, in Japan for, 5 years. So I think it's been a perpetual learning curve. The work that I'm doing at the moment is really taken me right back almost to my assessment roots, but a very new sector for me. And some of the work that I do is in the international development sector. So I'm learning all the time. And I think that's almost the pitch that I want to start with. The topic today is working differently. And working differently, it's going to mean it's a learning curve. From here on end, it's the learning never stops. So what I thought I'd do, I did prepare really nice slides. Well, I think they're nice, they're vibrant and green, but in the end they are signposts. So this is not a lecture, it's a talk. And I will start right from the beginning, and I am going to start with a confession and to say I have never done what I'm doing right now. So that is me stepping up. So I titled it Stepping Up, working differently in this time of COVID-19. But it's going to extend way beyond. So this is me stepping up, and this is me being really courageous and brave. All the experts tell you, if you work on a 2D kind of medium like we do, get to know the platform that you're working on, do a dry run, do your preparation, do all of that. I think I've done that pretty well, but I'm still nervous. So I'm just going to go with it and try and be myself. So I think the first thing is to say, stepping up. And with that, I mean, I have been so impressed throughout this crisis in terms of how people have stepped up in so many ways. So, and I don't want to say ordinary people, but often the unnamed people. We are dealing with a health crisis that has sparked an economic crisis, and that the ramifications we are going to feel for years on end. Let's be honest about that. I am sure you have listened to so many good speakers, so many webinars, so many podcasts. There is so much out there at the moment. And the message is very much the same. It is, we're not going back to 2019. So I don't want to just frame this around COVID-19. I also want to acknowledge we are in very different curves. So I'm always trying to put myself in the shoes of who it is that I'm talking to. And I'm in London today. It's going to be 32 degrees. That is pretty unusual. So that's why I'm in short sleeves. And I need a bit of brightness in my life. So South Africa is in a very different curve and a different phase in this virus and pandemic than where the UK was in March, April. It's not disappeared. It's not gone away. It's the statistics, the inquiries. We're preparing for a second wave, and it might just not be one wave. There's going to be multiple. So that is the very realistic picture. So I'm hearing a lot of words that start with re. And I'm sure in the work that you do, what you read, what you listen to, there's lots of reflections, a re word, reflection on lockdown. So what is the experience of lockdown been like? So I don't really want to just focus on lockdown, but it's definitely something that we've not encountered before. When we went into lockdown in London or in England, in the United Kingdom, my daughter was actually quite, and that's the positive spin children can put on that. And she said, "Mum, are we going to ration?" And I thought, okay, let me just think where this is coming from. Ever since we've moved to the UK, we've been watching programs on the BBC about back in time for dinner, back in time for tea, and then I take it through the decades. And really, what struck me is that after the Second World War, there was still food rationing in place in the UK for a very long time, right into the 1950s. So rationing is something that stuck in her mind. And at the beginning of lockdown, I said to her, yes, we may very well be rationing. So I think in the beginning, we have been through a lot as, wherever we are, in our families, in our communities, in our countries. The world is going through a lot in a very short space of time. You think about the word coronavirus, at the last day of July, the 31st of July, this year is 7 months old. And if you think about how much we've been through and the entire emotional kind of spectrum, the emotions that's been triggered by this, from fear, anxiety, anger, real worry, concern, sadness, loss. The other thing I want to acknowledge is I don't know how COVID-19 is affecting you today, right now. So I can't, when you're in a room with people, I can see who checks their phone, I can see who does this, I can see some of your faces on screen, and thank you for turning on your cameras. It's lovely to see you. For those of you who not, you've got reasons for that, I know. So the point is I can't tune in. And that's one of the things about working differently. I'll go to a structure in a minute. But the point is, this is a 2D world. So this is me being brave. I don't know what's going on for you today. So I hope there's something that resonates. It's not a lecture. I'm trying to speak as a practitioner and to give some perspectives of what I'm seeing and what I'm reading and what's happening in psychology and what's happening in businesses. So we've talked about, I've mentioned reflect. That's what I hear a lot of people say about lockdown. And of course, there's been some positives. Many families have said there have been positives, but we're not all in the same boat. And this is the other thing about this virus, this pandemic, this crisis, is that it doesn't affect us all in the same way. We're not in the same, while no one is immune, I think that's an important point. There is no exceptionalism when it comes to this. We're not all in the same boat. We are not all affected equally. I want to go back to the point that I made about what I've been impressed about this year is, while we're having this talk today about working differently, I am so aware of people who have not stopped working the way that they normally do. That right through the height of the crisis, at the peak, at the bleakest possible moment, doctors have gone to work, nurses have gone to work, teachers have been doing what they're doing, retailers, food shopping, essential services, all these people have left their families, have overcome their fears, and they do what they do. We talk about protective gear, we talk about face coverings, we talk about masks, hand washing, all the things we do, we can protect ourselves. But these people do what they do every day. So I think there's another reality. Some of what I'm listening to are doctors on the front line who say, look, this pandemic, we are learning as we're going along. There is no textbook in terms of treatment protocol in the early days, in the early weeks. We experimented, we're still experimenting. There's not a vaccine, there's a race for a vaccine. There's some positive glimmers, but it takes a long, long time, so it's not out there. And even if there's a vaccine, there is no certainty that we are going to go back anytime soon. So I just want to acknowledge everyone who's doing what they're doing. I am impressed by creativity, whether that's out of necessity or whether that is just I've had a moment to reflect, to think. I'm impressed by people's work ethic. I'm impressed by self-organizing, where people have just said, look, we have to take this in our own hands. What do we need to do to get our school open? Now, I totally acknowledge my lockdown guidelines and what's in place here is very different from what's in place in South Africa. But I have seen parents step up. And I've just seen things happening where out of necessity or feeling the impetus, but we have to make a difference here. So that's why I'm stepping up today. So I want to ask you maybe one question. I can't see the PowerPoint. Yes, I will send, very happy to send you the PowerPoint afterwards. It's not a lecture, so there are no bullet points. There are beautiful graphics. It's just that you don't have to watch me on screen all the time. In the end, I couldn't make it work. So happy to send it to you afterwards. What I want to say is just, I'm being very brave. And I've heard something, I also work as a coach, and as a coach, you always look for real good coaching questions that make people pause and think. And one thing that made me think actually came from a completely different source. So with school closures on this side, children are transitioning from primary school to secondary school. We are in a different place in our academic year. School finished in July. There are some children who's not been back to school from March. So it's either been online schooling or worksheets. So if we talk about work from home and managing remote schooling, that's with parents. That's what they do. And I'm sure very many of you are in exactly the same boat. So if we talk about boundaries and role overload and role conflict, that's very real for all of us. But what I was impressed with, my daughter's transitioning to a secondary school. They couldn't have a welcome afternoon like they normally do. She starts in September. So they just rolled it on to a virtual platform. And what I loved about that was this whole thing about, some of you might have read the book Lean In. So many years ago, sometimes a book speaks to you at the time. At the time when I read it, I was in a very different place in my life. And it just, it probably caused more questions than empowering at the time, as it was intended to be. So in that book, there's a question around what would you do when you are not afraid? And this headmistress just said, you know what, when she read that the first time, she thought, hang on, this is not helping me. I know it's written with the right intent, but it's not helping me. And years later, so the point is it didn't resonate with her. It just didn't do the job that it was intended to do. But years later, she went on a different kind of intervention, a different learning or leadership initiative. And someone asked the question, can you be 10% braver? And she thought about that for a moment. She said, hang on, I can be 10% braver. So one of the things, and I thought, hence me putting my hand up and said, yes, I'll do this. I haven't done it before. You can rate me afterwards. And I'm sure I'm making lots of rookie mistakes, but thank you for bearing with me. I thought I can be 10% braver. So that's me stepping up. So if we talk about, we 7 years into, or 7 months, well, actually it feels like 7 years now that I think of it. We're 7 months into 2020. If there's one word, and maybe you can put that for me in the chat box if you feel like that, that the word of the year for the 7 months up until the 30th of July, if we take off the table coronavirus, COVID-19, and possibly lockdown, is there a word that for you stands out? Just give me something. Otherwise, I'm going to make it up. Anyone? Let's see what comes up. Unexpected, endurance, change, family, disruption, distance. Surreal, I'm totally with you. Perseverance, flexibility, resilience. You've got it. Thank you. Learnings, challenges every single day, adaptable, retrospective, inner strength. Thank you. I mean, that is it. I'm not commenting on it. I just, yes, there are so many things that absolutely epitomizes this time. There's one word for me that stands out, and that is the word unprecedented. If you think about it, how many media reports, how many emails, how many, I don't know, journal articles, reports that have you read in the last couple of months that start in the first line recognizing we're living in unprecedented times? And I must say, at times I go, really? I'm now really over unprecedented, but I don't want to minimize in any single way. So at one point I just thought, I think it's also a sign of how overwhelmed many of us feel at different points in the day. As someone who's an individual contributor, who manages a team, who's working, who's leading a family, who works in a community, who runs a business, who is in politics, we at different points feel completely overwhelmed because there's no textbook for what we are going through. We try and take lessons from the past, and we're trying to learn really quickly. Every country has tried to learn how can we adapt faster and quicker and respond from what we've learned, how this virus has moved across the globe. But unprecedented, at some point I thought, I've had it. So here is what you do when it's remote schooling. At one point I said to my daughter, you know what, see if you can find as many synonyms for me as possible for the word unprecedented. So the point is, it just means, it's strange, unfamiliar, unknown. We are in unknown, uncharted waters. That bit, So what I mean by that, at some point, you get the lockdown blues. I've heard someone use that word. You get lockdown fed-upness. You just want to go back to normal. I'm going to do my utmost to not use the other phrase that's becoming completely overused for very good reason. And that is the new, and you can continue and complete the rest of the phrase. The new normal. I'm going to not say that. Because we don't know what that is going to look like. This is a transition. It is a process. So I'm going to start first with my pitch, because if you tune out after this, I just want you to hear the pitch. And the pitch is, I think I'm talking to IMM students who are bright minds, that's what I'm told, who are in their second semester. You've got a whole academic half year still in front of you. And this is what you need to focus on. So the best qualification is a completed qualification. And if you can complete it in the expected time, that is the best qualification that you can get. So let that focus you and let that guide you. Because we talk about unstructured and structured. It's hard for most people. We're bringing work into our homes. We're not all equally set up for it. It is just the boundaries have completely blurred. So my pitch is, I think this is a fantastic time to be a student. I think it's a fantastic time to be studying. I think it's a fantastic time to be engaged in an academic setting, to be in a group and in the company of so many bright minds. You have youth on your side. I'm not talking about me. you have youth on your side. I'm talking to who I think is the core audience today. And you are connected, you can collaborate, you can reach out. So from my world, as someone who's moved across countries, it's really difficult to sometimes find your new group, to find your tribe if you want, people that you have a real connect with. Of course, this takes time. I've had different professional communities. I have a circle of friends who are absolutely wonderful. But to find a professional home sometimes is really difficult. As IMM students, you have it right here. You can reach out to one another, collaborate. I mean, if you read stories about entrepreneurs, you will see how they got together. Very often they met one another while they were studying. You know, it was often, set up in a basement, a garage job, or they met one another early on. You've got energy, you've got bright minds, you can see opportunity, you can maybe see the things that I can't see. So this is the best time to be studying. You could be working on real problems right now. Not case studies. You are writing the case studies right now. I am talking as a practitioner, and one of the things on my development plan is to absolutely make more time to do more writing, to contribute to research. And this is what I hope, and I really want to encourage you to do that. I also acknowledge it's a very difficult time to be studying because there's so much else going on. We are in the height of a pandemic. You know people who are affected. You know of dire economic situations. Redundancies is a real issue. It's happening right now. It's happening this week. Retrenchment is a real issue. The shrinkage of the economy. I'm telling you things that you know. So to get through the lost, it's about moving through that swiftly. If that is happening to you right now, you know about the curve of grief and loss and denial and all of that. I'm not lecturing. It's probably to move through that very quickly and to say, what is possible now? It takes me to one of the coaching questions that I really like working with, and because this frames possibility. And it comes from a body of work around complexity theory, chaos theory, systems thinking, and it's a very simple question. And it's phrased in the way, what is possible now? And I'm going to repeat that. What is possible now, given everything else that is going on? So what is possible for you at this point in your life, in this point where you find yourself in your career, in your job, possibly have lost a job, or possibly unsure, or not sure how you're going to enter, or not sure how am I going to continue doing what I'm doing, considering all the uncertainty that is a certainty. What is possible now, given everything else that's going on? And it's a very simple question, and it's something that you can ponder about, you can think that over in your own time, and I'm sure you've got lots of tools in your toolkit to be self-reflective. It is about reinvention, but what I like about this question is when we are anxious, when we are frozen, when we are so super stressed, and so our emotions are so heightened, it's often not the time to think creatively. So I accept that while I say there's opportunities right now, often when we are frozen, fight, flight, freeze, we know about that, it's not the best time. What I loved about the time in Japan is there's a saying, and I'm not quite sure how it translates, but the practice in a Japanese office is, I'm talking a big corporate office where there are thousands of people working in a high-rise building. So it's very high density. Lunchtime, everyone clears out. The thought of having a sandwich at your desk is unthinkable. It is unthinkable. You take a lunch break. It is factored into their day. It's factored into their culture. It has to do with the Japanese way of life, right? But they start traveling early, they commute, but lunchtime, you don't pack a sandwich. It's not a packed lunch. You go out for lunch. Now, I accept it might not be the same. But the point of that is you leave the office, you get perspective. It's a change of air. In an hour, a lot can happen. And it brings me back to what's possible now. So often when you are stuck, whether that is on a proposal you are writing, on a document you're writing, on an email that you need to compile and compose, often we kind of go deeper into a groove. We get more stuck, right? And it's about shifting the energy. And this is not, it's not a band-aid that I'm trying to put on something, but the practice of getting up, moving, doing something completely different. If it helps you to cook a meal midday in the middle of the day and your work day allows for that, and that helps you to shift the energy, do that. In lockdown, we are confined. We have limits to what we can do. So I want to leave you with that question. What is possible now? Yes, I see wonderful things coming through about master multitasking. Yes. So one thing I just want to say about multitasking is we're really good at it. We've taught ourselves to be good at it. Our brains they don't necessarily like it. But the point is we are juggling a lot of things at the time. So let me get you to working differently. So I said uncertainty. We're not going back to 2019. We're not going back to the way things were. This has also been an evolutionary process and the way we work. Think about how many times you've wanted to say, hang on, I'd like more flexibility. Can I just schedule when I start and when I stop? It's really funny. I spoke to someone yesterday in an interview, and she said, look, it was about how do you motivate staff. And she said, I don't have a pot of money at my disposal. I can't increase salaries, pay people bonuses. I have to think about this differently. So I try and spoil people. I try and see what is it, what is it that they are into. I try and notice people. Who is the person who likes traveling? Of course, this is pre-COVID, but I try and, if there's someone who really likes to travel, if there's an assignment or if there's an opportunity, and that travel might be just, it might not be exotic, but it's a change of routine. What is it that excites them, that energizes them? But the other thing that she also said is that learning, what is that small thing that I can do for one person? What is that thing that I can recognize them for? How can I spoil people? How can I notice them? How can I motivate them? I try and spoil people. And I thought that was really interesting. So the world's going through a great deal of change in a small space of time. So we've gone into lockdown really quickly. It's not nudge theory. I'm talking here to people who are experts in marketing, in supply chain management. I mean, behavior economics. I'm sure you can tell me everything about nudge theory. We have gone into lockdown and we have shifted our lives, not with a gentle nudge, essentially with a kick. And we have to really get up to speed quickly. So that is where we are. In terms of psychological adjustment, it's going to take time. So here's something I can pull up from our own life. So after, I don't know how many months, we've had a different strategy. So I can't remember at what point we could start meeting 2 households outside for the first time. And this was for a child's birthday. And it was really awkward. So we could 3 households, I think 6 adults at the time, 2 meters apart. And we were awkwardly standing about under a tree in a park. And it was really awkward. We had kind of forgotten how to socialize face to face. And we're so aware of the guidelines and the risks and all the barriers that we can't see facial expressions and all the hand washing and all the sanitizers. At some point, we just had to laugh. because you just have to give yourself time. This is going to take time to unwind also. So stepping up in terms of working differently. Back in May, I wrote, or no, it was April. I was asked to write an article, and this was really very specific advice for, what practical advice can you give someone for remote working? And I thought, gosh, there's so much out there on social media. I mean, you can spend your entire day just looking at 3 tips for this, 5 tips for this, 10 tips for this. And this is the other point I want to make. There is a lot of time that can go into things that are probably not what needs to be done first. So there are different things that we get from social media. But it can also be something that distracts. And I'll just say that. Working from home is a lot around self-discipline. It's around organizing yourself. So let me go to my bullet points. I'll make it, there's 4 things I want to talk about. It's about lead and learn. It's about be kind. It's about being practical. And rebuilding for the future. And when I wrote the article, I'm a little bit like a magpie. I collect things and I don't exactly know where I read it, where I heard it. Was it a podcast? Was it something I read? Was it something I said? But someone told me the story of a manager writing to his or her team, and they started the email with, "You are not working remotely. You are not working from home. You are working through a crisis from home." And I thought, that strikes a chord with me. We are trying to be productive and to remain productive through a crisis. And this is about a marathon. This is not a sprint. So if we manage the self, and that's where it always starts, this is how do I remain productive in the long run? And no 2 days are going to be the same. It is completely compounded by economic uncertainty, by insecurity, by job losses, by things being cancelled. If you think about how many things this year have been cancelled. Yes, thank you. Someone saying self-discipline. I'm keeping an eye on what you're saying. And the disappointment of this is cancelled, and this is cancelled, and this is cancelled. I mean, a lot of it. And then also media coverage. You know exactly probably what I'm seeing on BBC News. When I watch BBC News, it's welcome to the viewers in the UK and around the world. So we see the same news around the clock. I think it is way back in March where the World Health Organization said, I can't remember the exact statement, it was about, really being discerning about what you consume in terms of news broadcasts. It was really at the start of when Italy was happening, and we heard words like catastrophe medicine. We saw the images. It's really disturbing. I know myself, it's really hard for me, so I need to take a really light media diet from time to time. So I do not watch the news broadcast late at night before I go to bed, because it stays with me, and we all need to know our boundaries. So it's kind of knowing what are your trigger points. You work in media, right? Many of you do. You work in marketing, advertising. This is what you do. But it's knowing your own boundaries and knowing your own tolerance levels. So if we talk about, as a crisis unfolds, also novel responses. I did say in the beginning, I've been so impressed by creativity. I have really been impressed. I'm not saying this is equally creative for everyone, and it's an equally innovative time for everyone. But there are businesses who have really stepped up. I find it really interesting to phone a call center, and they will say something like, but during this time, this unprecedented time, many of our staff members are working from home. So you might hear animals in the background, you might hear pets, you might hear children. That can happen. And I think there's a humanity and there's a tolerance that is coming through. So I was hoping when this all started that there might be a sense of more humanity coming into the world of work. For the first time, we're aware that families, or first of all, we all live and in different circumstances. We have, some of us live on our own. Some of us are, in families. We have children, we have pets, we have garden lawnmowers that can, start up anytime. So, this is life. So when we go to the office, we have an office persona, right? You get dressed for the occasion. I don't want to say there's an office self, but there's a professional self. When we work from home, sometimes that is blurred, right? What I find really difficult is, and I'm used to working from home, is I find it quite difficult that there are others in my workspace. So all of a sudden, we are running two offices from home, and I live in a flat. And so someone laughed. I said to them, I think what we are doing at home is we are hot desking, just to break the boredom, to break the monotony. We are switching desks. We are trying to be creative and trying to put a new spin on this, because it's day in and day out, right? There's so many things that I miss from going to an office. Let me hear, what are the things that you miss from going to the office and having that boundary? Liesel once saying businesses will need to identify and analyze challenges, recreate or adapt their business model to satisfy demands. People and employees are the most important factor to consider. And if they miss that mark, failure is inevitable. Thank you, Liesel. I'm with you. Can I quickly ask, what is it that you miss from going to the office? Oh, I miss people too. Yes, I miss people. A sounding board. I miss people. I having colleagues to has a sounding board. Teamwork. Uh, the printer. Oh yes, cartridges. I mean, that can just break the camel's back. It is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Yes, good coffee. I miss the office politics. I love that, Lionel. I love that. Human contact. Yes. So very early on in lockdown, I started seeing the articles coming out that says, is it RIP to the office? Is it the death of the office? Human contact. The small things, yes. So I can talk about what it's here like in London. So if you work in central London, yes. In central London, people commute and they're on tubes, trains, it's a long commute. So a lot of people are saying we're not missing the commute, but we are so missing going to the office. So it's something about boundaries. We are social animals, we are pack animals, so we miss that. And there's a lot of things that happen in the office that's got nothing to do with the work that we do. Some people talk about the water cooler moment. I sometimes think that's a very American thing, but it's the spontaneous things where we meet up and we bump into one another. I mean, I've been working long enough to know from an office where I could close the door to an open plan office. That was a big transition. And in an open plan office, something strange happens. You learn to very early on not make eye contact. If you are busy with something, this is before the time of headphones, right? If you're in an open plan office, you don't look up, right? If you're busy with something, because if you make eye contact, someone will start a chat, and maybe this is not a good time to chat. You are conceptualizing, you're writing a report, you're on deadline, you want to get something out. But sometimes that is really good. So there's a lot of things that happen in an office where you smooth over the edges, where good manners just kind of lubricates things. It just smooths things over. So after months and months and months of Zoom meetings, at one point my husband said, look, I have to go to the office. We're all going to sit in one corner of a boardroom because we have been, trying to figure this out. We just need to be in one room. And if you can safely do that and it helps you, that's maybe a way to do and way to go. I within restrictions and whatever the guidelines are for you at this point in time. But the point is being with someone in a room. I work in this digital two-way often, and I was in an interview with someone yesterday who said, look, I'm on holiday with my family. I had to find a quiet space. I'm in a coffee shop. It's not ideal, but I try to find a really quiet corner. We do the things we need to do, but there's a lot of things that happen in an office. It's got nothing to do with just doing your job. So in terms of the, I don't want to say the new normal, business as unusual, it is going to be probably a pendulum swing. So in the UK and London, there's a lot of talk about what do we do with all these office buildings that are standing empty at the moment. So what we're seeing is a boom in some way, not a boom. There is stimulation in the local high street, which is in our local shopping street. So if you were used to cutting your hair close to the office because that's convenient for you, you've shifted now to where you live, right? So there's a shift. So all the restaurants, the snack bar, the sandwich, everything that we do that's around offices, all that infrastructure is now empty. So we've got a huge housing crisis. So what about all those offices? These are the ideas that are being floated at the moment. So that's creativity. Is it going to happen? I can't say. So there's a lot of thinking about what do we do with offices. Because if it is the concept of we go into the office on a Monday or a Friday and we sit, at hot desks and we all sit and work on our laptops and it's a little bit like parallel play, that's not really what it's about, right? Because we can do emails from home. That we could, so something different needs to happen in an office. I've been asked a lot around how do we do a remote onboarding. There's still employment happening as we speak. So how do you bring someone on board? I'm not an expert on that, but there are lots of people who are working, writing, doing webinars on that right now. The thing about onboarding, bringing someone into an organization, something that I do know about is about organizational culture and how do you form culture and how do you change culture over time. And it's really difficult to change organizational culture. Generally, the experts say don't even attempt culture change if it's not rooted in a business, if you're not solving a business problem, don't even attempt it. So the way culture change often it works with bringing in new leadership. It happens through socialization processes, and this is typically bringing in new members. And this is when you join a new organization or join a new team. And the other thing is learning. It happens through learning. So how do you socialize new members into a team? What can you do? So those are the things that's going around in my mind at the moment. When we interview on Skype, so you might be very well be in a situation where you're going to do a Skype or a Zoom or a Google Meet or, any of these ways you're going to do an interview like this. It's different, right? And yes, you practice beforehand and everyone is a little bit nervous and anxious, but I think there's an understanding of that. There's a tolerance that this is new to all of us. So I actually meant to say this in the beginning, but it speaks to my point of being kind. We're all new to this. And I was encouraged by this when I said, gosh, I'm going to do a talk straight into camera, 2D. It's not very interactive. I would have loved to be in a room with you. That's not possible right now. And they said to me, you know what, we're all new to this. So we're all learning as we go along. And I was also very encouraged. I spoke to a woman who is on a board of a tech company. She said, look, I've worked in technology all my life. I took a short career break when my children were born, and now I'm re-entering, I'm starting at a different place, and I'm starting my own business. And I was really nervous when I joined this board because technology is moving so fast that I feel completely out of sync. I feel completely left behind. And then someone said to me, you know what, it's moving so fast. No one knows everything all of the time. And do not be the person who is afraid to ask. I think it takes enormous courage to ask. It takes enormous bravery. And sometimes it is about asking the simple question that no one has the courage to ask. I'm mindful of time. So I just want to say something about being kind, and then we're going to do some questions. Being kind, I've seen the best of humanity and I've seen the worst of humanity. So panic buying is probably an example of that. I find it really a contradiction that you queue to panic buy. I find that an enormous contradiction, but I know why people are doing that, because they are worried. But you know, the selflessness, I've seen examples. We do more online food shopping than I think what is prevalent at the moment in South Africa. But we've seen creative things of, gosh, I can't get a slot booked until 2 weeks from now. I can't get any deliveries. My neighbors are shielding. Can I put things in my virtual shopping trolley? Can I shop for you in that way if I can't make it to the shop? So there are creative things happening, which I think is really wonderful. So I think in terms of setting yourself up from home, I think the thing is to take breaks. I always want to jump to something I heard on the radio, what was it, last week. And this was a job seeker in the UK. She's in the bracket 18 to 24 years old. And I think she really summarized what we're talking about here is she said, look, I've applied for 230 jobs. And my best advice is, positivity, persistence, take days off to recharge if you can. Keep track. Keep yourself organized. Keep track. What applications are out? Where am I up for interview? What is the next step? Keep track. So this is about discipline. It's positivity, persistence. I'm not minimizing in any way what we're going through. I mean, the physicality, when we encounter people again in a room, what is it going to be like to read someone's body language? What is it going to be like to just read the energy in the room? What is that going to be like? We don't know. It's a brave new world. I hope that we can see the opportunities right in front of us. I think the best advice in my career has probably been to say, when you work with a client for the first time, no matter what business you're in, try and find out what is the biggest problem facing them right now. What is the biggest problem? That is an opportunity. Think about the skills that you have in your toolkit. Think about the others in your network. If you pool the skills and the tools, what is the potential? What is the gap there? So I think that is something to and then be kind to yourself, to others. About looking after well-being. There's lots of things out there, but this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So we have to be really kind to one another. I want to end up where I almost started. There's lots of tips. I'll make the article available, the slides available. These were really just sign points. I want to come back to where I really started at the beginning of, I think it's an opportunity to be bold. I think it's an opportunity to be courageous. If we don't step up now, myself included, there's never a good time. It's a good time to be studying. Let that give you purpose, direction, even if the outcome is uncertain. When lockdown happened for me, I was involved in coursework. It really helped me. It helped me to tune out some of what was going on, not being ignorant, not being not mindful, but decompartmentalizing. You put the boundaries. You don't have to reinvent yourself through lockdown. I see that there's a lot of people who feel that they have to rebuild, remake themselves. If that is what works for them, brilliant. That's wonderful. But it might not be the solution for you. Yeah, Lionel, yes, you need not solve the customer's pain, but you can add value, or you can bring a perspective, right? The other thing is, a reality is probably as work in the formal sector starts, with job losses, job cuts, it's a different market. I have a couple of questions that I would think I'd like to leave with you. I'll open it up if we think about supply chain management, I think, and I know there's been a brilliant talk by Anissa on that, is, PPE, why did it take so long? The other thing about marketing, how do you stand out? If we all go online and we all on all the social network platforms and the LinkedIns and all of that, how do you stand out? How do you make a human connect in a digital world. It's been a long way coming. This is just to accelerate it. I've been really impressed by people's kindness and their generosity. Let me open for questions. I have completely overrun my time. Now, before I do that, I want to summarize. It's a good time to be studying. Harness the bright minds in the room, the people on this call, the people in your network. Lean on them. Reach out to them. There's good days, and then there are days that's not so good. It's good to create purpose for yourself. This is about not for all of us thriving. It is about surviving. We are in different places in Maslow's hierarchy. For a lot of us, it's about surviving, and it's about thinking and building for the future, because that's what's going to be with us. So I'm going to leave you with my really, the framework was lead and learn. Many opportunities for that. Be kind to yourself and to others. Be practical. Really just practical in terms of how you set up what's possible now, and try and rebuild for the future. How, and what shape can you be coming out of this? Thank you so much for having me. Let's take some questions. Thank you, Marlies. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Ah, Maya Angelou, I love that. There was just, Herman, do you think a new type of leadership will emerge from this? Ah, wow. Herman, let me say this. This is now very self-confessional. One of the tips I got from a coach friend was when I said, look, I'm talking straight to screen. This is completely alien to me. And I need to look into the camera. And she said, you know what? If you can put, little photographs next to your camera angle, and just to remind you to look up, to make eye contact, do that, if that will help you. So yesterday, I asked my daughter, say, can you do some clippings for me? Take your magazines, do some just face clippings. This is the size. I want to stick them on next to my camera. I got a whole array. I've got two lovely smiling flat faces next to my camera. So that's what I'm looking at. I tell you who I didn't choose to put up to the camera. Amongst that was Boris Johnson, Theresa May. So I chose not to put that. I thought maybe that will be distracting to me. But to the point, leadership. I want to think there's an opportunity for humanity, just to, to where people are, not for bluster and kick down doors. I do want to think, yes, emotional intelligence, just put yourself in the other person's shoes. The realities for people are very, very different. We are all dealing with loss enormously. Just think about what people are going through. No one is exempt. None of us have immunity to this virus. And I hope it will create a shift. I say that with all the hope I have in me, but I always also see the shift in psychological contract where the economic reality is kicking in. I want to say when you go into a crisis, the way you go into a crisis probably sets you up or kind of defines the kind of crisis you're dealing with, because there's compound effect. I do think there are countries who are responding better than others, who are more proactive and learning the lessons. I think there are companies or countries with more difficulties, greater challenges, who have responded much faster, much stricter. I think leadership is not about making popular decisions. The best leaders we know are the ones who take their own advice, who are the role models, right? Where it's not about popularity, where it's taking the best decision for the greater good and not out of self-interest. I think it's really difficult at this point in political leadership. I don't use the word common sense. I used to want to say, just use your common sense, but we've seen common sense does not mean the same thing for everything. I think the guidelines need to be really clear. and there should not be exemptions. You have to try and role model. I try to not use the shoulds and the haves and the musts, but that's important. Leadership's important. I think, I really hope there is a redefinition. What we're also seeing is that management is important. Finding it hard to have work-family balance. Absolutely, Doreen, I can't agree with you more. I totally with you. I say that with, I'm in a flat, I don't have outside space. So I can't go out for a change of air. When it came to the point where we had 1 hour a day of exercise time, it was really, really hard. And nature has been wonderful. We are blessed, and that's the thing about gratitude and every day counting blessings. We have a beautiful park a couple of blocks away. It's actually close to us, and that's really been a sanctuary. We've been really careful, and I think it's about, we go out at times when it's, you know, not overcrowded, where we can avoid other people, but, you know, try and find nature on your doorstep. I'm with you about balancing family life. You know, today it was, please no one be on the broadband, please don't want be on screen. You know, we don't want this to drop, so I need to do this. So it is really hard. I think I've worked with entrepreneurs, and they say entrepreneurs are born around the kitchen table of other entrepreneurs. They see how significant people in their lives work, where they've got more appetite for risk. I think for parents here, you don't have to be a brilliant parent. You do the best you can, given everything that's going on. Our children are learning a great deal from this. Maybe it's not the academic curriculum, but they're learning. They're seeing us stepping up. They're seeing us trying to do the best we can. And that's when, if you need to take time out, do what's possible. There's no band-aid. I can't do that. Be kind, Brunella. Thank you. Be kind. Take the time to think about your actions and how you can use this opportunity to become more humble. Absolutely. I mean, I didn't want to do a lecture. I can't possibly do a lecture. I say I've been impressed by how I've seen people stepping up. I've been incredibly humbled by people at the front line. I think what this crisis has done is completely redefine frontline key workers. What is essential work? And where are the inequalities? What advice would you give to frustrated employees in rigid organizations that are not being agile? Oh, Zelda, that's a tough one. So I'm going to turn this around. Zelda, I heard something similar being asked once. If there's one webinar, and this is me doing blatant marketing, this is a podcast on Alec Hogg's Biz News on the 3 First Strand founders. It was maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Go and have a look at that on YouTube if you have the time. I happened to do my PhD research, my thesis, First Strand, the company was my case study. And I worked and interviewed the 3 First Strand founders. They are incredible leaders, and they've built a body of incredible leaders around them. And they've managed to pass it around through the generations. And I'm coming to the question. So I was in a session where the question was asked to Paul Harris at the time where he was the CEO of First Strand. The question was, how can we be better at managing poor performance? And he said, can I turn that around? Can you ask yourself the question, how can I be better at managing poor performance, or whatever the question might be? So to come back to the question, I'm not sure I'm answering it, but you know, how can we influence? I think we all have agency, we all have influence, we all have a voice. I think when emotions are heightened, you know, we don't always come across in the best way. It's to really think about the consequences, but can you influence in a positive way? Can you tone down the tone and just say leaders are under enormous pressure, and they are human too. So we need leaders, we need managers, we need calm, because panic creates panic. If we can take a step back and say what needs to happen, gradual shifts. So sometimes we make massive leaps. If it can be gradual, can I just be the change? For me, it was about stepping up today and being bold and being courageous and saying, maybe I have a perspective. I don't have all the answers. What else? I think I'm over my time. If someone wants to give me a heads up on that. Need to panic calmly. Yes, absolutely. So is it that thing, is it time to panic yet? Will you tell me when it's time to panic? It is, you know, we're living in certainty, uncertainty. I'm intrigued by paradoxes. I'm intrigued by, we all say we want to be more resilient. At the time when I lived in Japan, I was kind of mesmerized by these wooden structures that have been there for decades in a country that's built on fault lines with so many earthquakes. And these buildings among the high rises survive. Yes, they've had work done and strengthening work, but a wooden structure survives with incredible earthquake tremors every day. It survives because it moves. It doesn't freeze. It's not rigid. So maybe there's something in that metaphor and that analogy. Need to panic calmly. I'll take that from you, Lionel. Thank you. What else is there? Leaders trust, however, managers micromanage. Do we think that more leaders will come out of this and trust more? Really interesting questions. Managing virtually, leading virtually, it's so hard. You go and sit at your desk, everyone is dispersed. So that check-in meeting first thing in the morning, whatever your practice is, it's often just to check in. How are you this morning? You know, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? What is your energy level like? What's on your list for today? Maybe there are 10 things on your list. Maybe you get to 3. I do think to create some structure helps me. And maybe I don't get to all 3 things. I've learned to shorten the list. And if it needs to roll over, it needs to roll over. And I need to be okay with that. Deadlines are important, but there is in terms of what is possible now, in terms of work output, in terms of performance. It takes longer to do work when you are dispersed. The fatigue that sets in when you are one way, where there's a complete whole new parallel universe. I point this way because this is where my mobile phone is. WhatsApp has become, or social media and chat groups have become the grapevine of the office, right? So while a meeting is going on right here, there's a whole universe that's happening in parallel to this. So this is the things that we need to tackle, and I hope to do more work on this. But, you know, try and recreate those social contacts. One of the offices that I do associate work for, people sit all over the world, and they have a lovely thing, they call it 11 Cs. So on a Wednesday, this is a very English thing or a very British thing, I think, you know, it's a coffee chat, right? So whoever's available, you don't book, it's not scheduled, but it's in the diary. If you can join, you join. And just what's going in your day, what's going in your life. Of course, there are boundaries. And that's a small organization. It's what works in their culture. In a bigger organization, it's far more difficult. But the thing is, if we work remotely, you know, if we work like this for a prolonged period of time, what can we do to replicate some of the social interactions? What are some of the social things that we can do? You know, social engagement, we did that, you know, we did a couple of meetups with friends, but weekends have become downtime. You need to rest, and we all rest at different times. For me, it's really helped to switch the order around. Sometimes I cook in the middle of the day. It just helps me. It's a break in my day. I'm doing something different creatively. I try to just switch off. If you have that flexibility, it's not the same for everyone, right? I know. Shakila, this was this was amazing. We're all in a trial together. Thank you. It's a tough getting my mindset right, as every day is just a different challenge. I think you're brutally honest. I'm so with you. Work, studies, family. Yes, absolutely. I want to say, I really want to come back to where I started. I don't want to keep you too long. The time's just completely flown. It's focus on what's on your plate. It's really important. if you have coursework to do, try and do that. Work with the what's possible now question if you can. Try and stick to the deadlines. I recognize it's not an ideal time to be studying. From someone who's done studies in different times of my life, there is never a good time, believe me. I'm not saying this is the best time, but there is never a good time. It always gets harder. And when this stops, you're just at the beginning. We never stop. I didn't think at this point in my life I will be working on Zoom and Teams and Google Meet and not managing to get my slides to work. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick to what I know, and I'm not going to fiddle. I will do the dry run and the trial and all of that, which is a good thing to do. I just didn't have the time. So I thought I'll go with what comes naturally to me, and I hope there was something in it. Yes, Herman, it's your job to swallow a toad every day. Do it first thing in the morning and get it over with. Excellent advice. I think the thing is, you think in terms of, I looked up something, and I'm really then going to close because I think this meeting's going to end. We are way over time. I looked up something in one of my career coaching books the other day, and I came across an article from Peter Drucker. He passed away in 2005. He is generally considered as the father of management studies. And, you know, he was a prolific writer. If, you know, Peter Drucker is still being quoted today, and they say in his time, he was always 10 years ahead of the cycle. But it was a thing of figure out how you work. This is about lead and manage the self, right? You cannot lead and manage others before you lead and manage teams, before you lead and manage departments, companies, and this is how the complexity goes. But, you know, he probably said it first in his own words, and others have built on that and said it in their own work. But figure out how you work. When do you do your best work? If you had a terrible night's sleep, you're a new parent, or you're just a light sleeper like I am, and you waste it in the morning. You know, do what if you can shift things around and do mundane things that need to be done when you're not in your creative zone. We don't always have the luxury to do that, right? But if you get a better night's sleep and you have, you know, slay the dragons first thing in the morning, the big things that you have to do. So figure out how you work. Try and do, you know, and we try and help people to do the best work in the best way and to be their best selves, right? This is putting us all under immense pressure. And what I'm seeing a lot, and people who are further down in their careers maybe have the humility and maybe have the maturity somewhere. I'm not saying that's me. I'm privileged to work with people like that, and I get that from others who've mentored me and been great influences in my life. And they say, look, I've learned more from failure than I've probably learned from success. And it's a thing of, you know, when are you not in flow? But what can you learn in this crisis that can maybe propel you one step at a time? And so do your coursework, try and get it in on time. It's a wonderful time to be studying. I hope you are solving the problems, at least tackling the problems and writing the case studies right now for the things that we are dealing with, because this is history in the making. So we don't need more crises. We've got a health crisis. We have a economic crisis. We have climate crisis. We don't want our professional disciplines to be in crisis too. This is a time to shape up, to step up, and I need to put my money where my worth is. Or, yeah, what is the saying? Put my money where my mouth is. So yes, I'm going to try and live that. So thank you for the IMM for inviting me to do this. I hope there was something that resonated with you today. I will make the article available for a lovely magazine. It was in the NGO Whisperer. I think it was about volunteering. Sometimes we have to volunteer, and there I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Christel. That was amazing. That was really great. Guys, just repeating what Maria said, we'll post the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides on the website under events. Thank you, Christel. That's really great. We hope to make use of your services again to do a follow-up on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am super nervous, but you have been wonderfully kind to me. It's lovely to see some faces. Thank you to the familiar faces in the room. I want to say keep safe. I sign off my emails, take care. That's what I usually do. If you want to switch on your cameras quickly so I can just say hi, you don't have to, no pressure. You are 1 hour closer to the weekend. It's Friday. Lovely to meet you. Go well and stay safe. And we know.
Christel, if you can buy alcohol or liquor, please go have it, Pims.
Thank you. I don't invite my South African friends for let's have a glass of wine. That is just cruel. I won't do that. But yes, I am going to have I in solidarity with you, and I will do something different today. But thank you for having me. I can't travel to South Africa right now. It's giving me a connect to home, and go well. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely Friday. Good luck with your studies. Do your job.
Thanks, Christel. Bye.
Thanks, Christel.
Hello.